Good morning, my friends. We are continuing our guideline for conduct of members of the Sevaka order, which we are expanding to call the Ananda way of life. So even those of you who live alone or with your families at a distance from any Ananda center can still benefit from these wonderfully insightful guidelines Swami wrote for us. Let's start now with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, Friend, Beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, Beloved Master Paramhansa Yogananda, Saints of all religions, dear friend Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow to you all. Help us to feel your living presence always with us, a constant guiding companion. Give us the clarity of mind and the courage of heart to listen to your inward calling and to move confidently forward through this world in attunement with that guidance. We are your children. Guide us, bless us, bring us home to thee. Om. Peace. Amen. So now we are in Article 4 still, which is home life, and we're in the last subject about this, last two paragraphs. The member should look upon his body as the temple of God and treat it accordingly. He should give it proper daily exercise, but should not make exercise the center of his life. He should not drug his mind and body with too much sleep, nor yet, in a spirit of fanatical dedication, deprive himself of needed sleep. In every way, he should treat his body with respect and care, without ever overindulging it, much as he would treat a friend. I like the way Swami does that. He's very apt with his images. So yesterday we were talking about diet. Now we're talking about sleep and exercise. The whole context of this is Swami trying to give us a practical understanding of the physical world. Now, once again, for most of you who are listening to me, or many of you are listening to me, who are already very familiar with the Ananda way of life, these things just seem obvious. But in fact, spiritual paths take greatly different orientations. And so we do need to stop and really see exactly what Swamiji is saying to us. First of all, he's saying the body is part of what you have to consider. I have a friend who was raised as a Christian Scientist, which is not now as popular a teaching as it was actually when Master came to America. I'm not familiar with the whole premise of it, but the basic idea of Christian Science is that we deny the physical reality altogether, that we emphasize most strongly the divine element of things, and we don't think so much about all the physical realities of this world. I may be totally misrepresenting it, but the point being, in the way that Master taught, he talked to us about the importance of fresh air, he talked about the importance of exercise, he talked about the importance of right diet. Now, there are also spiritual paths in which exercise and diet, keeping the body fit, even if we take care of the body properly with raw juices and raw foods or whatever it might be, or by proper breathing, the physical body will never age or die. And such things, man can have great power over the material world. And sometimes the emphasis on the spiritual path is that you prove your spiritual power by having this power over the physical body. And that becomes your primary effort, is this constant need to have power over the physical body. And you might do extreme austerities or You might refuse all medical intervention because I'm going to cure myself with my mind. And all of those things are true. Master himself, true in the sense that you can develop that kind of power. But in order to do so, you have to concentrate on developing it. Master's way, Swami's way, is to be more moderate in relation to the physical body. Neither ignore it, as some people do, nor make it the center of your spiritual path. The way Master wrote to Swami Kriyananda, he talked about keeping the body, healthy and fit for God realization, meaning that the purpose of the body is so that we can meditate, so that we can serve, so that we can pray and be devotional in our relationship to God. But it's a means to an end, not an end in itself. However, if we don't take proper care of the body, it can interrupt, it just can interrupt our ability to do everything else that's important. I was talking to a friend of mine, a young man who has great physical strength and vitality, but was overusing, taking advantage of that strength and vitality in such a way that the long-term effect was likely going to be either to injure or to debilitate the body. And I was talking about the fact that we're playing a long game here, that the real purpose of that physical body is for you to be able to meditate and remember God. And if you injure it in youthful zeal, or you use your willpower to develop it beyond a sort of natural strength or so on, unless it's a really deep calling from God, that's really the path I'm supposed to follow, what Swami recommends is that we exercise, follow proper Etarianism, get sufficient sleep. I developed a tremendous interest in taking care of my body when I was in my late teens. Not excessively, because it's never interested me that much. I sort of joke because Master has this one page that I've seen somewhere where he talks about if we drew cartoons of ourselves to show us what we really look like, different parts of their bodies would be really emphasized. People who are really interested in eating would have a great big belly and a very small head, perhaps, if it's excessive. For myself, I always see myself as a mouth, just sort of sitting on a pair of shoes. And the shoes will carry it, and wherever it's carried, then it will talk. And that's sort of where my world is. And I know that there's a body in between that I have to take care of. But I became very interested, as I was mentioning yesterday, I became very interested in proper diet, very interested in fresh water, very interested in fresh air, and a moderate interest in exercise. But exercise is so physical, it doesn't interest me as much as mental and spiritual levels interest me. But I have recognized that unless I properly exercise the body, it interferes with the things that are really important to me. So I don't seek it out on its own terms, but I've recognized how important it is for the things that are important for me. But most interestingly, this is what I figured out one day. Oh, I must have suffered a great deal of ill health in previous lives, because I came very early to just sort of, you've got to be careful with this body or else it will betray you later on. You'll lose vitality, you'll lose energy, it will become ill from having been overused or ill-attended. And that's basically what Master is talking about. What is my intention? What is my overall intention in life? And how does the body fit into that intention? I was amused by a friend of mine who has a very big brain and was a pioneer in the entire computer industry. In fact, she said to me way, way back when all of this was starting, she had a top secret job in the basement of the Pentagon and she was working on computer code at a time when very few people even knew what that was about. Her comment was, she didn't actually know she had a body until she was nearly 50. And it wasn't that she mistreated it, it's that she fundamentally didn't know it was there. She was always operating in her mind, and I at least know that my body is carrying my mouth around. She hadn't even really come to that realization until much later. Now, that's the kind of, we want to live in a balanced way. So people at Ananda tend to be very health-oriented, tend to be, and exercise becomes part of it. Exercise, it's interesting, see also Master gave us the energization exercises, which are his unique contribution to the science of yoga, where we access the willpower by using the body as the vehicle to develop willpower. But also in doing that, we, to use its own phrase, we literally energize the body. And that the practice, the regular practice of the energization exercises, which takes between 10 and 15 minutes a day, it's not a arduous discipline to run through that series of exercises once or twice a day. It is one of the most efficient ways to keep the body strong and healthy. And what it does also is it makes the mind-body connection so that we're using the power of the mind and the power of the will to draw the right kind of energy through the body. So even when we're following dietary laws or the necessity for sleep or physical exercise, the more consciously we can do it, the more we can train both will and body at the same time, the more the long range effect will support our true goal, which is spiritual realization. So there's always, when we're, the body, the way we treat the body and the way we relate to the body is also one of the ways we can find out who we are internally. You know, I can be very mentally active, but physically, I don't relax by doing physical things. I was traveling with a friend of mine once. We were sharing a condominium for a few weeks on a trip. And she was industriously vacuuming the rugs of the condominium. And I just thought to myself, never on vacation would I pull out a vacuum cleaner. Rarely, in fact, almost never, in my own actual personal at-home life do I pull out a vacuum cleaner. It's physical activity of that type is not relaxing to me. But her response was, oh, it's relaxing to do something physical. We're all oriented differently. And so we have to work with our orientation. I will not naturally incline toward physical activity. I'll read or chat with my friends or do something that occupies my mind. So I have to make a conscious decision. I have to make a conscious decision to take a walk or remember to energize, of course, to go swimming. But it pays off. It's an investment in the long-range viability of our whole life. And we need to understand that and make it very important. This is what Swami's telling us. Exercise, he even says exercise daily. That's what Master told him. Master gave him instructions when he was a young monk, every few hours to sort of run around a little bit. I mean, literally run around a little bit, just keep the body going. Oh, here's one more piece that's interesting. When I read the book Mejda, Mejda is published by Self-Realization Fellowship, and it's written by Master's younger brother, Ananda. Mejda is the affectionate title that you would give to an older brother. So the younger brother always called Master Mejda because he was his older brother. But one of the very interesting things about that book is how much Master was involved in athletics, in running, in team sports. He would organize the other boys. He would organize competitions. He would organize teams. It was really interesting to me because it never crossed my mind to be interested in sports. It just wasn't my interest. But it made a strong impression on me that Master was very interested. He was very interested in having people use their body in a dynamic, challenging way. And that actually reoriented me greatly in terms of exercise. Because if he, as a young avatar, felt that that was one of the forces that needed to be activated, and whenever I resist exercise, it's never for a good reason. It's my resistance to being physically active is always a sign of tamasic, lazy energy. I can't think of an instance in which I have chosen not to follow my exercise routine when it was ever a good decision. It was always a sign of a tamoguna, the lowest, the darkening force, getting a hold of me and dictating my behavior. And even if exercise itself is only a means to an end, overcoming the power of the gunas to compel us to wrong action is absolutely central to the spiritual path. Even the name, one of the Sanskrit titles given to the guru is Triguna Rahitam, which means the one who has mastered the compelling force of the gunas. It's that the fluctuating forces of the material world no longer affect his consciousness. When I can say that, I can stop exercising. But until then, it's the fluctuating force of the three gunas, primarily the darkening contractive force of tamoguna, that causes me not to follow through on my daily intention to exercise. So for that reason, you see, we can access more subtle states of mind through the body. Having the willpower to do the right thing with the body, whether it's exercise, hydration, or right diet, is helpful in itself for the long game of keeping the body healthy. But it also is essential for the most important reality, which is not to be compelled by dark energy, by contractive energy. So that's also part of the story that we have to remember. Okay, there's one more paragraph here that is important. A couple should look upon each other also as temples of God. Every aspect of their relationship should be touched with other consciousness. That is to say, with the feeling that they are relating to each other not only on a human level, but inwardly in spirit. So this is about home life. Of course, one of the things that happens when people live together, and we were talking about this earlier in this section, when we were talking about, should not be based on egoic over familiarity, but on mutual respect, supportiveness, and love. So now here, Swami's giving us a touch. I think he talks in the subject about personal habits. He talks about marriage in personal habits. I'm just because he's making an implied reference to sexuality here without talking about it explicitly, because Swamiji never felt that such a personal matter should be a matter of community rules. I mean, this is something that each person has to feel in their own spirit. Speaking specifically of sexuality, when Swami wrote the book about marriage as a path to self-realization, Swami would not say that, because marriage is not a separate path to self-realization. But marriage, expansive marriage is the word he used, so that the marriage relationship expands rather than contracts our consciousness. He talks about sexual moderation, but he says the difficulty is what is moderate for one person is overindulgent for another, and is starvation for someone else. So the word has to be defined by how it expresses itself within your own life. So this is here how Swami is giving us a global suggestion. They should look upon each other as temples of God, which is to say, you're not there to just serve me, to bring me my slippers, to have my dinner ready when I'm home, to be a willing partner in my sexual exploits whenever the thought crosses my mind. We have to also recognize recognize that each one of us has a unique responsibility to live according to the inward promptings of our soul. And even if our love for each other is profound, if our partnership in life is exquisitely important to us and harmonious and wonderful, that still doesn't change the fact that each of us is unique in the eyes of God. And we must support and allow each other to walk the path that God has called us. And of course, if God calls us to be together, then that is part of the path that we have to walk. I remember a friend of mine who'd had always wanted to marry, but before she married, she lived a very simple, very nun-like existence. And then after she married, the complications now of having, of sharing a home, of sharing a house, of sharing a life, were making her, unbalancing her, because in her own, she felt off balance because she'd had her own way of doing things so exact. And she sort of said to me that, you know, she was working and waiting to get back to that singular balance that she'd known before. I laughed out loud. There was nothing else to say. I said, it's gone. If that's the life that you wanted, then you should have stayed single. Because once we commit like this, we no longer have the luxury of our own single karma. That's why many people choose not to ever take a partner, because it does involve you now completely in the karma of someone else. And if you have children, then you start multiplying that. But that is the life we're called to then. It's not like it's better or worse, it just is what it is. And so Swamiji is now suggesting to us that one of the ways that we remained balanced in that is never start thinking that we own each other, or that you owe me, or that I no longer see you as an individual with a separate destiny. Now you have become defined by your relation to me. You see, that's what people do. You are now how you relate to me, rather than how you relate to God. No, but it's a more challenging way to relate. It's much easier if we can just put people into their categories, and it's much better if they'll just stay there. And but not better in the long run. But if we're connected to help each other realize each other's own potential according to their own lights, we can advise, we can suggest, we can discuss, we can have opinions, but we can't actually interfere. And sometimes we have to watch people make grave mistakes, especially when we start talking about children, but even when we're talking about partnerships. I remember once someone was urging upon their partner a certain way of behaving, and Swamiji, but the partner was resisting. Swamiji said, you have to wait until a person sees for themselves what their priorities are. And unless you're someone's guru, you don't necessarily know. We don't know what forces, have brought them to this hour. And just because this is how it feels to you, doesn't mean it necessarily feels that way to them. It's very difficult to explain, because there is no precedent for it that I know of how extraordinarily sensitive Swamiji was, how respectful he was. When you were in Swami's presence, and goodness, we wanted to know what he thought about our lives and our life direction. But no matter how unified we were with him, he always remembered that we had our own destiny with God. And he always, what you always felt from him above all was he was there to support you in your spiritual journey. And everything else happened, but it happened in relation to that fundamental commitment. This is not easy to maintain because everything in human life leads toward habits and leads toward expectations, leads toward a gradual lowering of energy and attention. Swamiji made the comment and has made it, he said, I mean, it's unfortunate that he would even have to say it. He said, I find that I'm different than most people. He said, most people gradually become careless about their closest relationships. They begin to think, I don't have to put out as much energy here. In fact, they'll even say that as a principle. You know, I have to put out energy all day long, but when I come home, I don't want to have to put out any more energy. Meaning I want to be able to just collapse. I mean, when that was articulated, I want to just be able to collapse into the lowest denominator of myself and have that be okay. Well, it isn't. I remember talking to another man who had a family, and he had a demanding job, and he talked about, just not coming home with enough energy to really relate to people. I said, you have to leave work earlier. This is working within an Ananda context. But I said, you just have to leave work earlier. You need to, if your normal ending time is 5, you need to make it 4:30 or 4. And you have to get community support for that because you have a wife and you're raising children. And you have to bring home real energy. You can't spend it all somewhere else and then have nothing to offer them because you will lose that relationship. And then you will lose everything. So this is, all of us, we tend to think in the minute. What do I want in the minute? But that's not what we're doing, because those minutes add up to a lifetime. And I have seen so many situations that have gone sour, and they never needed to. They never needed to, but we didn't follow Swami's simple advice. Look upon each other as temples of God. Should be touched with other consciousness, with the feeling that they are relating to each other, not only on the human level, but inwardly in spirit. This is, of course, we're meditating together, doing spiritual practices together, serving together, sharing, inspiring music, sharing inspiring reading. There's countless sort of ways in which this can be carried out once the decision is made to do it. And that's what Swami's suggesting here. This is about home life, how do we should not view their homes in ordinary worldly terms, but as temples of God. They should fill them with godly vibrations, with devotion and joy. It sounds so simple when Swami writes it like that, but we have to really just look at the house that we're living in, at the people that we're living with, if we have a partner. How am I thinking about this partner? As my this, my that, or as belonging to God and then given to me by God to help them as Divine Mother herself would help them to move toward the light. As I say, simple to say, but sadhana for every day. But that's what we're here for, aren't we? This is what it comes down to. All relationships are sadhana. Everything in our life is sadhana. Sadhana means conscious, deliberate, spiritual practice. That's why most people are not on the spiritual path, because it takes everything you have, but it gives back everything that we want. God bless you, my friends.